And that, my friends, is how America was made great once again. Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics. Radio broadcaster master, now the celeb on the web. He's the smarty of the party. He's in cahoots with the grassroots. Jimmy at the Crossroads brings you thought-provoking commentary, hard-hitting interviews, original satire, and the best bumper music known to man. Jimmy at the Crossroads!
Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix, I said. Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. People want answers, they want to understand. They come to the crossroads and Jimmy gives them the plan. I said, gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Come on, Jimmy, what you got?
Hello, my friends, and welcome to another edition of Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, your host for the program, bringing you engaging, intelligent talk, Sang style once again, and of course, very possibly, quite probably, almost definitely, the only political talk show host with a theme song in which he plays harmonica himself. Good to have you today. Once again, in partnership with the Washington Examiner, such a pleasure and a privilege to be with you. Lots to talk about today. I'll get some thoughts, share some thoughts from yours truly on Joe Biden and his potential presidency in a little while. And in a few minutes, we will be joined by Carrie Severino, president of the Judicial Crisis Network, to talk a little bit about the decision today, yet another major decision of the Supreme Court of the United States on DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. We'll get some analysis from lawyer and president of the Judicial Crisis Network, Carrie Severino, in just a few minutes. But first, let's get into what exactly the Supreme Court decided, what the reasoning is, some of the issues involved, with Homeland Security reporter at the Washington Examiner, Anna Giartelli, who joins us now via Skype phone here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Anna, welcome to the program. It's good to have you.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Thanks for coming on. So let's just get right to it. What's this decision? What does it tell us? What did they decide?
Yeah, so in a 5-4 decision, you had Chief Roberts side with the 4 liberal justices on the Supreme Court. And it's basically, they're saying President Trump wrongly terminated or attempted to terminate DACA, which is a program that was created by President Barack Obama in 2012 after Congress didn't pass comprehensive immigration reform. President Obama took executive action so that children who were brought here before the age of 16, don't have a criminal record, and fit other criteria, could get protection from being deported and could work in the country until a permanent solution was reached. Trump rescinded that in 2017, and what happened today, a number of lawsuits were filed in 2017 and 2018. The Supreme Court said the way you tried to dismantle the program is not right, and so we are not going to let you take it apart. But they did not side on the program in and of itself. So you could see the Trump administration try again in the future. They probably won't have enough time to do so before the election.
So it comes down more to the process and the reasons that were presented for doing this, and with the timeline and the way they went about it, and as opposed to the issue of the program itself.
Exactly. Yeah. What they decided was that it was in violation of the Administrative Procedure Act, which is just saying that there's a certain way you're supposed to do things. Conservatives had argued before this that Obama illegally took this action on his own, saying, I have a paper, a pen, and a phone. I'll do it on my own if Congress isn't going to act. And so then by the same standards, Trump took action and said, I'm going to take action on my own and rescind the program, kind of by the same logic. So now what we have is to wait and see. Certainly, immigrant advocates are relieved at this. The program is applicants must renew their status every 2 years. And so what you've seen since 2017 is people falling off, the numbers declining. At one point, you had 800,000 people who had been approved under DACA. So it is a pretty widely felt program. And the implications of if it was allowed to proceed would have been, does Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the ICE agency, do they go after immigrants who were DACA recipients and begin deporting them? This at least gives a pause. And the question really next is, how does the White House respond, and the lawsuits likely to come from any response?
Now, there was a dissent from Justice Thomas, who was joined by Justices Alito and Gorsuch. Kavanaugh did a separate dissent of his own. What was the central premise of the Thomas dissent?
Thomas argued that he really just called it politically controversial, really an effort to avoid a politically controversial move. And then Brett Kavanaugh, who is a Trump appointee himself, filed a separate opinion, and he sided with both the dissent and the majority. So he didn't technically take a side, which was interesting. But certainly the three, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Neil Gorsuch, another Trump appointee, all said it was incorrect. It would, quote, hamstring all future agency attempts to undo actions that exceed statutory authority.
Yeah, it seems like what Thomas was arguing, along with Alito and Gorsuch, is that this DACA program is unconstitutional or illegal anyway, and so you shouldn't rule to uphold it using any standard. You should dismiss it altogether. Is that right?
That is, yeah. And they're saying that the court basically got scared in light of the court has ruled and has been supportive of some Trump changes to immigration policy. It has been, not supportive of others. And so really, I think it has been supportive to an extent that today's ruling to some is surprising because it did go against the Trump administration. And earlier this week in the LGBTQ decision. So it's definitely pleased both sides of, or I should say in both ways, the Democratic Party, and it puts the Trump administration on an interesting path 5 months out, less than that, from the election. I just reported a Pew Research Center poll this morning saying that 54% of Republicans support giving a path to legal status to children in this category, immigrant children who were brought here illegally. And so Trump's base is very divided on this, but his tone in the 2016 election and throughout his presidency has been very opposed to DACA and anyone who comes into the country illegally. So
sure.
He's at an interesting place forward.
Just a few minutes left with our guest, Anna Giartelli, Homeland Security reporter at the Washington Examiner, our partners here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. So what are the practical implications for what many call the dreamers who are party to the DACA program of this, and what does it set up for Congress to do? I know I've seen a number of members of Congress in the United States Senate and House who have said this means that Congress needs to take up further action.
Yeah, I mean, really, so this program, because it's an executive action, it's not a law. It's president took action. And the idea of America is you have three branches that balance out each other. And when Congress doesn't take action and the president does something, the Supreme Court is then kind of the deciding factor between the two. And so what lawmakers are calling for, including you have Senator Sass and Senator McSally, both Republicans today, they're saying Congress needs to act and legalize or legislate this program, codify it so that it is actual law. And we come up with a plan what to do for people who are in the country without documentation or arrived illegally and all such, including people who have crossed the southern border with families during the big crisis last year and were not removed. They were released into the country waiting for asylum court dates years down the road for folks like that. So going forward, Congress has a real chance to move on this. But again, like you see, even with, different bills being proposed right now on police reforms and the justice system changes to it, it's completely split down party lines. And even with a need now to move on police reforms, there's nothing urgently coming down the line from Congress. There's debates, there's bills, but there haven't been votes yet.
Yeah, this is certainly fascinating from a political standpoint in terms of the dividing lines. And also, I think it can be difficult for those conservatives who may be favorable to a sort of DREAM Act by law, yet oppose the DACA decision or DACA program because it is executive action. It's difficult in some of these divisive times and divisive topics to get a little bit more nuanced like that, I would think. But Anna Giartelli, again, reporter at the Washington Examiner. So great to have you on to break this down. Thanks for joining us on Jimmy at the Crossroads today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Once again, Anna Giartelli breaking things down for this decision that just came down from the United States Supreme Court. This is something that, it's striking. Another decision involving Chief Justice John Roberts here that I think many conservatives especially will say was not a particularly conservative decision. Let's dive into some legal analysis now on what the Supreme Court did today from Carrie Severino, who is the president of the Judicial Crisis Network and joins us now here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Carrie, welcome to the show. It's good to have you. Oh. One moment, please. For some reason, we're not getting volume from her. Stand by one moment. Nathan Matoush working some Matoush magic here. Okay, so we're going to play a little quick video break here, get this sorted out. Stand by. One moment. You're watching Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. Okay, welcome to the auditions for the official voice of Jimmy at the Crossroads. Name, please?
Kermit the Frog.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi-oh, Jimmy the show host here.
Next. Next.
I told you they wouldn't go for it, Froggy. Hiya!
And you are?
Stewie Griffin.
Can you sing a bumper song?
Oh, absolutely. La 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 la, la 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 la. This is so beneath me.
Thank you. Okay, next, previous experience in voice work.
I was a duck.
Next.
Affleck!
Okay, Dr. Evil, you're up.
Okay, everyone. Welcome to Jimmy at the frickin' Crossroads. We invite you to watch for $1 billion.
Mr. Simpson.
Wait.
Mr. Simpson.
Who's talking?
Mr. Simpson.
What?
Over here.
Oh, hey.
Let's hear the announcer voice.
I can't do an announcer voice. Oh, but I can do Mr. Burns. Announcer guy, eh? Excellent.
George W. Bush.
I'm here to auditionify for the announcerification process there for Jimmy Mushroomburger.
It's Sengenberger.
Jimmy In-N-Out Burger.
Next. And you are?
The name is Doc Brown.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Welcome back to the Crossroads.
I love your enthusiasm. When can you start?
Last year.
auditions for guest host of my new show, Jimmy at the Crossroads. Please step up and state your name.
Hi, I'm Dr. Phil. You know, every pancake has two sides, and we're going to get to the other side of that pancake when we come back from the break.
Mr. Shatner.
Bernie Sanders will probably be the Democratic nominee.
You're going to have to talk faster.
I was going at full speed.
Kelsey Grammer.
Very well. I'll send you all to heaven before condemning you to hell. My little snowy flake, poor little snowy flake, triggered in every way.
President Bill Clinton, whenever you're ready.
Hey, how y'all doing? So, how about we play a little game of the old switcheroo?
Thank you.
Hey, if I get the gig, do I get an intern?
Thank you.
Just asking.
Tom Hanks, go ahead, please.
I am Tom Hanks at your service.
Can you try an announcer voice, sir?
Oh, an announcer voice. Oh, come on. I got a lot of movies to do. Okay, I'll do an announcer voice. I am an announcer. I'm the announcer. Ha! How was that? The announcer guy. Ha!
I think we're going to have to do another audition call, guys. Thank you so much. Bye. Looks like we've got things figured out here. You are on Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, bringing you engaging, intelligent talk, Sang style, here on the program. So let's talk with some legal perspective on the DACA decision of the Supreme Court of the United States with Carrie Severino, president of the Judicial Crisis Network. Carrie, how are you?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Perfectly.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Doing
How
well.
are you doing?
Doing really well. It's a disappointing week for the Supreme Court, but other than that, everything is good.
Absolutely. So let's start with today's decision on the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. We just heard from Anna Giartelli, reporter at the Washington Examiner, who gave us some of the basic facts about this. But what's your legal takeaway?
I think this is really concerning to me because I think we're seeing a pattern of the courts being used as a partisan weapon against this administration in particular. And this is another example of Chief Justice Roberts being complicit in that politicization of the court, really. You had this case where we're dealing with the DACA program, but just a couple of years ago, the Chief Justice agreed with several of the other members of this court that the DAPA program, which had a very similar basis for it, was unconstitutional. And now you have him saying that actually, even though DACA, presumably it's equally unconstitutional, the government has to jump through a series of hoops in order to actually stop enforcing a unconstitutional program. I mean, that is bizarre to me that you would create procedural hurdles and roadblocks to stop doing something that's illegal in the first place. The only difference that seems to be between his decision in the DAPA case and his decision in the DACA case is the identity of the president, and that's a real concern to me, to see a different standard being applied to President Trump than was applied to any previous president, really.
So Justice Clarence Thomas seems to echo your sentiments in his dissent, joined by Justices Alito and Gorsuch.
Yeah, absolutely. He said this looks very political. It seems like the court's trying to avoid making a controversial decision here. But you know what? That's something that ultimately is going to get the court into even more partisan and political trouble. You can't dodge the important issues the court is supposed to decide by simply kicking the can down the road, as he did here, as the chief has done in the census case before this. In fact, what that does is turn the court into a much more political actor. And that is going to be very bad ultimately for the institution of the court as a whole. And certainly it's bad for the rule of law to have a double standard here where you apply it differently to the Trump administration than to others.
You know, what's so striking to me is that this was a program put into place unilaterally by the President of the United States, not by Congress. And then the President of the United States today, or the current President, Donald Trump, says, we're getting rid of this executive order, in essence, that Barack Obama, the previous president, had put into place. It seems logical to me that a president should be able to rescind another president's order, especially if it is unconstitutional, Administrative Procedures Act or not.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what Justice Thomas's dissent was really saying. He's like, look, this was put into place by a memorandum by President Obama. It is bizarre to say that you can't then, if that's all you did to put it into place, how is it that it requires more to get rid of the program than it did to start it in the first place, especially when the program is simply not legal. And you don't need to give a huge, analysis of all these different reasons you're rescinding it. Saying this program is illegal in the first place, that should be enough. That should say it. There were a couple other dissents. Even Justice Alito had another dissent, and then Kavanaugh said, okay, even if you said that this is not illegal and void ab initio, he went through and said, look, they even did do enough analysis here. Why is this not enough analysis? So this case should have been decided so many ways in favor of rescinding the DACA program that it's really shocking to see the Chief Justice yet again tie himself in knots trying to come up with a reason. And again, all this is really doing is requiring the Trump administration to go back to the drawing board, write up a whole, show your work is basically what they're saying. Except for that when you already have something that is clearly illegal on its face, you don't have to show any more work than that. So I think what the majority is saying is, well, just go back to the drawing board and give us some more explanations. But who's to say they won't have some other political reasons to find fault with those explanations when they finally come up with them again? This has taken literally years of litigation, and that seems to be the strategy.
Again, we're talking with Carrie Severino, president of the Judicial Crisis Network. And one thing that it seems to me, Carrie, that is the case about Chief Justice John Roberts is that he seems to be, more than anything else, more than some kind of conservative, for example. In decision after decision, we see a lot of instances where he's not operated as a conservative justice, but he seems to be an institutionalist first and concerned about the perception of the Supreme Court in the public eye. At least that's how I have tended to look at a lot of what Justice Roberts has done. Chief Justice Roberts has done as Chief Justice, especially since the Obamacare decision. What do you think about that idea of an institutionalist first?
Well, I think that is kind of how he thinks of himself, as somehow protecting the institution. Here's what concerns me. What he is doing is not helping the institution of the court. It is hurting the institution of the court. The best thing for the court as an institution would be for it to have a reputation of abiding by the law, the rule of law, applying it fairly and even-handedly to parties whichever side of the aisle they are on. What we have here is a court that's acting very politically. It's acting politically, ironically, in a way, in order to try to avoid particularly people on the left in the media saying that they're political. So they know that anytime they have a decision that might be in favor of the Trump administration, they're going to be called political. So they do kind of a reverse move and say, well, let's rule the other way, and then they won't call us political. The bottom line is that is still the politicization of the court. A few years ago, Justice Roberts had a great line in one of his cases about racial preferences. And he said the best way to stop discriminating on the basis, to stop discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race. You should not have discrimination on the basis of race, whether you think you're doing it for beneficial or for evil purposes. That same thing happens here. The best way to stop the politicization of the court is to stop making politically motivated decisions, even if you think you're making them for great reasons. No, if you're motivated by politics in your decision, then you're politicizing the court, and ultimately that is the worst thing you could do for the institution.
I want to spend our remaining moments talking about another decision I know you've been speaking out about, and that is the Bostock case. The Supreme Court decided on Monday in regards to LGBT discrimination in the workplace. We talked about this with Ilya Shapiro of the Cato Institute the other day, but can you sum up that decision and give us your overall perspective on what the court decided on Monday, Carrie?
Yeah, so what was at issue in that case wasn't, is it a good idea to include sexual orientation or gender identity in our non-discrimination laws? That's what a lot of people have been talking about, but that's not what the court's deciding. That's what the legislature was debating when they're trying to decide whether to add that to the laws. What the court was looking at is that already in the law? And we know there are 21 states have those anti-discrimination protections written into their law. Many federal laws and regulations have those words in. They say in addition to race, color, national origin, sex, religion, they have added sexual orientation or gender identity. So we know how to add that language. It is a existing concept in American law. The question here is, in 1964, when they wrote a very different language, when they just said because of sex, did that already do it? Did it turn out that all the last 50 plus years of people trying to amend that statute to add the language, they didn't need to anyway? It turns out it was already in there in the first place. The answer is patently no. None of the politicians who signed that, who voted for that legislation, none of the first 50 years of judges who looked at it said there's the same thing is to have discrimination on the basis of sex and discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. They're just two very different types of discrimination. You can't combine them into one simply but for the goal of bringing in sexual orientation discrimination into the law. There is a way to do that. Congress actually was in the middle of debating adding that to the law as we speak. The Supreme Court got ahead of them and said, we're going to just do it ourselves. That's not the way that our legal system is supposed to function. So, whether you agree or disagree with the idea of amending the law, the question here isn't should it be amended, it is who decides. And it is emphatically the legislature that is supposed to be changing our laws, not the courts.
And it comes down to, at least in the way that both of the decision and the main dissent were arguing on Monday, textualism and this idea of interpreting the text as it was written. How do you assess the use by Justice Gorsuch of textualism to support this concept that he moved forward to uphold it?
Well, look, he tried to give it a textualist explanation. Unfortunately, in doing so, he embraced a very different type of textualism than we have seen in his whole last, decade and more on the bench, both in the 10th Circuit and in the Supreme Court. The idea of textualism is you look at not what you think the politicians might have wanted to do, not what you think the best version of what they could have done was, but what the actual laws were that were passed, because that's the language that was agreed upon by our elected representatives, right? But you have to look at it as it was originally meant. What did those words mean at the time? And Justice Kavanaugh's dissent in that case did a really good job of clarifying the problem with this hyper-literalist, reductivist view of textualism that Gorsuch uncharacteristically applied in that case. He said basically discrimination because of sex. Well, sexual orientation is related to sex, and gender identity is related to sex, and so those are all part of this discrimination because of sex. But that goes way too far. As Justice Alito pointed out, that would encompass things like, well, sexual harassment is also related to sex, but you certainly could fire someone because they've been harassing people sexually at work. Justice Kavanaugh said you need to look at this as the whole phrase, and we know that in context, phrases can be understood differently than this reductivist view. I love the example he gave of the phrase an American flag. If I had a flag of the country of Germany that was produced in an American factory, it's got a Made in the USA sticker on it. Is that an American flag? In one hyperliteralist sense, sure, it's a flag, it was made in America, and it's an American flag. But we know that if in general parlance and in the context of a law that perhaps was dealing with how we treat, for example, an American flag, you mean the stars and stripes. You don't mean just any old flag that was printed in the United States of America. That's what's going on here. He took these words apart. He said, well, it's related to sex, therefore it must be in there. At the time, there was a very clear understanding of what discrimination based on sex meant. For 50 years thereafter, that understanding was equally clear. You don't get to decide you've discovered a new interpretation that never was contemplated by the people who passed the law. There's a way to change the law, and it's to pass it through both houses of Congress and have the president sign it. It's not to simply find 5 votes of unelected judges.
Well put. Carrie Severino, president of the Judicial Crisis Network. So great to have you on. I hope you'll come back. Thanks for taking the time today.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Once again, Carrie Severino joining us, breaking down a couple of these significant cases. I mean, what a week for the United States Supreme Court. I think largely negative. They didn't take up 10 cases dealing with gun rights on Monday. They did this decision today with regards to DACA. My overall view, I think that there should be a DREAM Act of some sort approved, a variation that provides permanent legal status to the children of illegal immigrants, these kids who came here as children at least, through no fault of their own. But I think it needs to be done legislatively through Congress, not by executive order. And it was very wrongly decided on the part of Chief Justice Roberts, who has a tendency to take decisions that he thinks need to happen and find some way in a pretzel of sorts to create a pretzel in order to get to, arrive to that decision. So today's decision's wrong. I think they should have taken up qualified immunity, immunity for police officers on Monday, as opposed to saying, no, we're not going to take this up. And I do think, although there's a compelling counterpoint case to what Carrie Severino was presenting that we heard from Ilya Shapiro as far as the idea of the Supreme Court's decision here on textualist grounds as to why redefining the word sex is okay should be done in this Title VII, I think it was wrongly decided for reasons that Carrie laid out pretty darn well. I mean, it's not a good week on the whole for the United States Supreme Court. Hard-pressed to find anything particularly good that has been done. We'll see what happens next. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. We're going to take a break in a few minutes. I've got some thoughts on Joe Biden, the Democratic nominee, and why he's just got some glaring flaws, especially in terms of 3 things we're looking for in the next president of the United States. Keep it right here. You are watching Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. Be sure to subscribe, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads.
America's politics are crazy. The culture is in flux. That's why we work hard to help you keep up.
More politics, more culture, and more access.
We focus on the biggest stories of the day with some of the biggest names in politics and punditry.
Go to our website, WashingtonExaminer.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
To Obamacare.
Pardon me.
Pardon me. Oh, hey, you must be Freddie May.
Frederick, please.
Yeah, whatever. Hey, listen, I'm Bill O'Goods with OSLAP. That's Obama's Student Loan Acceleration Program. And we just passed Obamacare, right? We're about to pass another bill to nationalize student loans. It's going to be a whole federal takeover.
Excuse me, sir. Could I get you a drink?
Yes, do you have a Lady Gaga?
Of course. One moment, please.
How does this benefit SCALP, the Society of College Academics for Loan Proliferation?
Well, I'm glad you asked. More loans equals more money. That's more money for everybody. You could raise your tuition excrementally in perpetuity forever, and there's nothing they can do about it. You still got to go to school, right? You still got to get a loan. You ain't got no money. It's a win-win. Oh, and here's another thing. You can't discharge student debt by bankruptcy. You could have 3 student loans. You could go you can't declare bankruptcy on any of them. I don't care how much money you don't got.
But what about the students?
The who?
This.
Remember, my friend, here at OSLAP, we make money the old-fashioned way. We steal it from the students. This is for you.
So what you're saying is, this is a gold mine.
Indeed it is.
A gold mine.
A gold mine.
Stop! Let me tell you what's really going on with student loan debt today. You see, in 2010, President Barack Obama nationalized the student loan system, tying it to Obamacare. At that point in time, student loan debt across the country totaled $800 billion. Now, about a decade later, that number has doubled to $1.6 trillion. This is particularly because the federal government keeps giving out the loans, which has allowed colleges and universities to blithely increase their tuition without any concern. And the federal government just keeps giving out the loans because guess what? If you're a borrower who's deeply indebted with student loan debt, you cannot discharge that debt in bankruptcy. You're stuck with it for life. That needs to change, particularly because there's no risk to the lender. That means the federal government can keep giving out loans, and also there's no risk to the colleges and universities. So they'll just keep raising tuition regardless. There really does need to be a congressional action done to address this student loan crisis in America. And at the Millennial Policy Center, we have some great extensive research on how to do this, including some bills working their way through Congress. So log on to millennialpolicycenter.org today to learn more.
Right on.
Well, it's going to be a pretty good decade. Freddie, let's have another.
Oh, sure. Let me just.
Hi, Jimmy. This is Bill Clinton calling your secret hotline here. I gotta keep it down because I'm calling from the doghouse here in Chappaqua, New York at our place. Don't even ask. All you need to know is she's on the warpath again. Oh boy. Hillary yelled at me for listening to you. I have to do it in secret. But I really admire your show. I really do. I'm calling to wish you the best. All the best. In the future and even right now. Oh, here she comes. Listen, I gotta go, but you got a great show, and you're gonna do very well in the future. I'll tell you that much. Oh my God, I know it's gonna happen. She's gonna have me read chapters of her book again, put us both to sleep. I know what the title of her darn book should have been. Should have been called "How I Dropped the Ball on the 2-Yard Line with 3 seconds left in the Super Bowl." I gotta go.
Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics.
Are you all right with being a shark maverick? Was it okay to team up with you?
I'm good, man. We're a part. It's a partnership. We're like this, Jimmy. I got you.
I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome back the voice of the crossroads, the face of the crossroads, the legendary Jimmy Sengenberger.
Welcome back to Jimmy at the Crossroads. I am Jimmy Sengenberger, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. Great to be with you today. As always, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not done so already, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads, Jimmy at the Crossroads on YouTube. Also, you see it right there, at Sang Center. That's Sang with an E, not an A, Center on Twitter. Go ahead, sign up, please. That is to say, follow me on Twitter. And also, go ahead and log on to Facebook and like the page if you haven't done that. Jimmy Sengenberger, media personality, facebook.com/Jimmy Sengenberger Pro. And on top of that, the other day we launched a brand new membership program, Jimmy's Crossroads Club. Members.jimmyatthecrossroads.com, or go to jimmyatthecrossroads.com and click Crossroads Club at the top. You've got exciting benefits. It's a tiered program. Lots that you can check out. We're going to be doing some special exclusive online courses and just a lot of things exciting there. As perks, you can get Jimmy at the Crossroads mug, wine tumbler, Jimmy at the Crossroads harmonica engraved with your name on it, and so much more. Members.jimmyatthecrossroads.com. And if you go to shop.jimmyatthecrossroads.com, you can access our shop online and buy all these products, including a download of the Jimmy at the Crossroads theme song featuring yours truly on harmonica and, of course, the great Biff Gore doing vocals and on guitar. So great to be with you in partnership with the Washington Examiner, which you should also follow, WashingtonExaminer.com, and on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So I want to talk a little bit about Joe Biden. Joe Biden running for president of the United States, bumbling Joe Biden, trying to keep it together when he's off teleprompter, but when he's on teleprompter, well, he can read a teleprompter pretty well. I want to start off with cut one, where yesterday, or a couple of days ago, he was giving a speech on the pandemic and the Trump administration's handling of it. Take a look at this.
On Monday, Donald Trump said, quote, "If we stopped testing right now for COVID-19, we'd have very few cases, if any. If we stopped testing now, we'd have very few cases, if any." It's a statement that's not only absurd, it's absolutely tragic. Yesterday, the head of the White House task force on coronavirus, the vice president, claimed success in the fight because deaths are, quote, down to fewer than 750 a day. 750 fathers and mothers, sisters and brothers, uncles, aunts, husbands, wives, children dying every day. More than 20,000 a month. That's greater than World War II level casualties each month. That's more than 5 9/11s each month. And this administration is engaging in self-congratulations. Maybe good enough for Donald Trump, but it'll never, ever be acceptable if I'm your president.
So Joe Biden, trying to stake claim to the idea that President Trump has failed in terms of managing the pandemic. I will say that there are imperfections and problems and issues in terms of some of the ways in which President Trump has conducted himself in terms of this pandemic as a pandemic manager. But more than the policies, more than the steps that he's been taking, which have overall been fine, not perfect, problems, issues to be sure, but it's much more been about his tweeting than anything else, creating the perception that you have sort of pandemic management chaos in the Trump administration. I think it's much more been perception than reality, although there have been some flaws. The testing does need to be ramped up still more than it had been in the past. But by and large, that's the biggest reason why we're seeing so many cases still being reported, is because a hell of a lot more people are being tested. So even that criticism of President Trump has its limits, shall we say. But what Biden is trying to present is this picture that he is the guy who can handle management of this crisis, or a crisis, but especially pandemic management. And if you watch Biden when he's off of teleprompter, if you watch Joe Biden when he has to think off the cuff and answer questions, you get really concerned about his ability in the heat of the moment to quickly address a question, to properly present his answer in a coherent fashion. I mean, this is a guy who I think legitimately people are talking about, does he have some kind of dementia to him? Not as just a joking derision, but as a serious question. People on the left were asking that very question about Joe Biden because of the way in which he bumbles his way through an interview, through a conversation, through a speech without having a teleprompter present. I mean, I used to think Obama had it bad when he was just That was what Obama was known for, in my book, when it came to off-the-cuff speaking. But at least he was forming coherent sentences on a consistent basis. He just kept throwing a lot of uhs and ums like an untrained speaker, which, of course, he's not an untrained speaker. But when he wasn't reading from a teleprompter, he couldn't have it together in terms of uhs and ums, but he could at least put the sentences together in the end. Biden, you have to wonder. So while he's able to present a good speech and compellingly make the case, hey, I'm the guy who can manage a pandemic, listen to my written speech as I give it to you, it's a very different story. But let's go to cut 2 here, because this shows the way in which Biden would operate this sort of pandemic. Keep in mind, Biden is a guy who wasn't happy with the protesters who said, we need to be let free, reopen America. He knocked those protesters, and he was very supportive of, and continues to be supportive of, some of the more stringent measures that states have taken across the country. And yet, at the same time, he's turned out very supportive of the Black Lives Matter protests. Well, here is Joe Biden talking about President Trump's planned rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, this coming Saturday.
Instead of leading the charge to defeat the virus, he just basically waved a white flag and has retreated. He's so eager to get back on his campaign, to his campaign rallies, that he'll put people at risk, as everyone's pointed out, in violation of the CDC guidelines that still warn against large gatherings, as long as he's going to allow this to happen. But he's ready to do it as long as, notwithstanding CDC guidance, as long as the people showing up sign a waiver promising they'll not hold the campaign liable.
Look, I don't think President Trump should hold this rally on Saturday. I think more than anything, optically, it's not good for him. I understand the basis. Let me rev up my base, do one of these rallies, get a lot of people there. We need to regenerate some excitement. But this is going to be a rally that people will watch. Look, I was at President Trump's rally in Colorado Springs, Colorado in February. And the president fired up the crowd. He put on a show. I said at the time that this is a showman trying to give you the best political show, if not the best show on earth. And that's what he's doing. He's playing to the in-person crowd, and I never understood that before going to the rally. So I get that. I have that in mind. But this is a rally that is going to be an instance where he's speaking to the whole country, where the media will be watching, will be looking at all of his word choices. He better not slip up doing off the cuffs, because while the media is going to nitpick everything, this would be an unforced error in the sense that, okay, he'd be enthusiastic, energetic, rev up the crowd, be entertaining, but that doesn't mean that you should, at this moment, open yourself up to that level of potential criticism optically and otherwise, because you never know what the president's going to say. So my view is he shouldn't do the rally on Saturday, but Biden's a hell of a guy to talk about this kind of a rally and saying, no, you shouldn't go, when you have significant, massive protests that have been happening, and he's been supportive of them for weeks. We've had the funeral and memorial services, multiple, for George Floyd. There wasn't much social distancing going on, masks or not. And Joe Biden was supportive of those protests and non-critical. He's a hell of a guy to talk. But that speech excerpt that we just heard from Biden, where he said Trump waved the white flag of surrender, which is interesting because before, in the previous clip, didn't he say that Trump claimed victory? You can't claim victory and surrender at the same time. It's one or the other. Either you're victorious or you're surrendering. And Trump, I would say, is claiming more victory, at least enough to say we can start getting back to normal and have businesses take different steps, different precautions, what have you. But the reality is that the way in which Joe Biden's talking about this, white flag of surrender, we need to keep things strict, but hey, we're going to give a pass to these protesters, but not these protesters. We want to give an okay to the right cause getting together to call for change versus people wanting to rally together with President Trump. Maybe you could be consistent in that way and say both. You shouldn't do both, as opposed to just saying Trump shouldn't do his rally, but these protesters are okay. You have to be consistent in that way. Joe Biden's not. Joe Biden is very restrictive. Joe Biden would be a terrible pandemic manager. Thank God Joe Biden is not president of the United States right now. I mean, you go to cut 3 here. This is Biden, I think yesterday, where he said a couple of ideas, presented a couple of ideas of his own for how he would handle the reopening of America. And I think this also underscores not only the pandemic failure, but also the fact that he could not be a good person on the economy.
I think we should establish, and I will establish, what we call a pandemic testing board, not unlike what Roosevelt did in a different circumstance, a national testing board during the Depression, to surge testing nationwide and ramp up the production and fair distribution of the PPE. Were I in office, I would be taking $25 billion, putting essentially a vaccine czar in charge. When, God willing, we get this vaccine, how will it be distributed? Where will it go? How will it get there? How will we guarantee that it will be able to be distributed in a way that all Americans have equal access to it?
First of all, I don't know why he doesn't just take the mask off completely. I mean, what does he gain from just hanging it down off of his ear? But with that said, that's his idea. Having some sort of just simply testing and getting vaccine ramped up and having the government micromanage the distribution of the vaccine at the federal level. That's it? That's what he wants to do economically? Those are the crux points of his economic plan? Okay, I understand. Fine, if you want to ramp up testing more, we should do more of it. Beneficial. Vaccine, okay. But I know a heck of a lot of people who don't want to try a vaccine right when it's released, who want to wait, give it a little bit of time, and the idea also that you're going to be able to just generate a safe vaccine in short order has always been, whether it's Trump claiming it or Biden, it's always been premature to make that claim. But bottom line is Joe Biden would not be the right kind of economic manager in addition to pandemic manager that we would need in any way, shape, or form. And then you get to race relations. This is the guy who was responsible for the 1994 crime bill. This is a guy who said, you know, if you don't support him and you're black, well, you ain't black. This is a guy who has made comment after comment after comment. The idea that he's going to be good on bringing people together and mending fences and addressing the tension across the country with regards to race seems absurd to me. Now, I will say that in that regard, I don't think that President Trump has presented the best front in terms of trying to mend those fences either. And from a messaging standpoint, I don't think the president has hit the marks in a lot of ways. But here's the reality. I was talking about this last night with a friend. President Trump, more than anything, was elected to boost the economy, to bring us back into a strong economy, and he did that through policies, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and the deregulation. I think the trade war was problematic, but nevertheless, overall, this president helped to bring back the economy from the doldrums of Barack Obama. Now we are in a recession because of this pandemic and because of all the shutdowns. We need somebody who understands what's necessary in order to bring us back. Again, that is President Trump. Trump checks the marker overall of the economy. The other two things that people are looking for right now, pandemic response, mixed for President Trump. Biden would be horrible with that. Much too restrictive, crush the economy. massively expand the size and scope of government, much worse than Trump could ever be on pandemic response. And neither of them particularly good in terms of the racial divisions. So basically, if you look at those three things, you've got 1.5 for Trump and 0 for Biden. And then you've got Biden. We showed this clip the other day, and let's wrap up here. Cut 4, Joe Biden making claims that are absolutely asinine, ludicrous, unsubstantiated, that President Donald Trump, if he loses re-election, will have to be escorted out of the White House.
And let me ask you this, and I know this is a strange question to ask an American politician, maybe easier around the world, but have you ever considered what would happen if the election result came out as you being the winner and Trump refused to leave?
Yes, I have. I was so damn proud. Here you have 4 chiefs of staff coming out and ripping the skin off of Trump. And you have so many rank and file military personnel saying, whoa, we're not a military state. This is not who we are. I promise you, I'm absolutely convinced they will escort him from the White House with great dispatch.
This is the same guy who's considering Gretchen Whitmer the terrible, the tyrannical, in Michigan for vice president. And he's the one who's saying, oh my gosh, police state of President Trump, who has to be removed from the White House. That's absurd, unsubstantiated, and asinine. We talked about this yesterday. Joe Biden has far too many flaws, far too many issues. You may not like President Trump in a heck of a lot of ways. I've had my issues with him time and time again in a variety of different areas. But you put those two up against each other on policy, on competency, on capabilities, and especially when you look at economy, pandemic management, and race relations, you put all those things together, Joe Biden just doesn't measure up. He's got far too many problems that will never be addressed. That much is clear. That is it for us today. Thanks for joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Tomorrow we have a special edition, Free to Choose Friday. We are expected to be joined by Lindsay Burke of the Heritage Foundation and Corey DeAngelis of the Reason Foundation to talk about school choice and what the pandemic crisis we have seen with COVID-19 and coronavirus tells us about school choice. We will talk with them about that tomorrow and so much more. Be sure to tune in then. Subscribe on YouTube, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads. Join the Crossroads Club membership, members.crossroadsclub.com as well. members.jimmyatthecrossroads.com. Thanks to Nathan Matoush, Carrie Severino, Anna Giartelli, and to the Washington Examiner as well as you. We'll see you next time. God bless America.